The morning light struggled to warm the vast, minimalist space of the Chicago apartment. Perched high above the River North neighborhood, the home was a monument to modern success. All clean lines, cool grays, and designer furniture that seemed too perfect to be truly lived in. It felt more like a showroom than a home, a carefully curated image of a life that was organized on the surface but hollow at its core. In one corner, a collection of expensive toys sat in pristine condition, their bright colors a stark contrast to the sterile environment, their untouched state a silent testament to a childhood spent in quiet observation rather than play. A profound sense of emptiness clung to the air, a coldness that had nothing to do with the city's weather and everything to do with the emotional distance between the two people who called this place home. From the master bedroom emerged Claire, a woman whose warmth seemed to defy the apartment's chill. She was an elementary school teacher, and it showed in the gentle empathy of her gaze and the soft way she moved. As she gathered her things, her eyes caught a flicker of movement behind the expensive leather sofa. It was Leo, William's 7-year-old son, a small figure almost swallowed by the oversized brand-name clothes he wore. He clutched a single piece of paper to his chest like a shield, his large, brown eyes watching her with a familiar mixture of caution and a desperate, unspoken hope. From the kitchen doorway, William watched the scene unfold, a cup of coffee in his hand, his expression a mask of detached efficiency. For him, this was a familiar routine. Another woman making a quiet exit from his life, another morning where his son was just a part of the scenery. But Claire did not follow the script. Unlike all the women who had come before her, she didn't ignore the small boy hiding in the shadows. She paused, her steps silent on the polished concrete floor, and offered him a smile that was genuine and unhurried. Instead of making for the front door, she walked toward the sofa and crouched down, bringing herself to his eye level in a simple gesture of respect. Her gaze fell on the paper he held so tightly. "What a beautiful drawing you've made," she said, her voice soft and encouraging. On the sheet, drawn in the unsteady hand of a child, were 3 stick figures holding hands beneath a bright yellow sun. A tall man, a woman with long hair, and a small boy standing between them. It was a simple, hopeful portrait of a family that didn't exist. That small act of kindness landed like a shockwave in the silent apartment. Leo's face, so often a canvas of quiet resignation, erupted with an expression William hadn't seen in years. It was a breathtaking mix of pure, unadulterated joy and utter disbelief. For the first time in a long time, his son had been truly seen, not as an obstacle or an afterthought, but as a person with something to share. Leaning against the doorframe, William felt the impact of Claire's simple words like a physical blow. The kindness of this near stranger brutally exposed his own years of negligence, the emotional chasm he had allowed to grow between himself and his son. In that one moment, the carefully constructed walls around his heart began to crack. It's incredible how a single moment can change everything, and if stories like this touch you, please consider subscribing. It helps us continue to bring them to light. William's invitation for breakfast was an impulse, a clumsy reflex that surprised him as much as it did Claire. The words, "So Leo won't be alone," felt like a flimsy excuse for a much deeper, unacknowledged need. For years, his mornings had been a silent, efficient routine of ushering women out of his life before his son even woke up. Now, he was actively asking one to stay, to enter their space in the full light of day. He watched her, expecting a polite refusal or a knowing smile, but Claire simply nodded, her gaze soft and discerning. She looked past the handsome, successful man and saw the flicker of desperation in the father. In her quiet acceptance, there was no victory, only an offering of simple, uncomplicated grace that felt both foreign and profoundly necessary in the cold, empty apartment. The breakfast that followed was a quiet revolution. The clinking of silverware against ceramic plates sounded different, less like a formal intrusion and more like the natural rhythm of a shared meal. William found himself not performing, not trying to charm or impress, but simply observing. He watched as Claire listened, truly listened, to Leo's rambling explanation of the different eras of dinosaurs, her chin resting on her hand. She didn't offer condescending praise, but asked genuine questions, treating his 7-year-old expertise with the same respect she would an adult. When Leo let out a loud, uninhibited laugh at a joke she made, the sound echoed off the polished concrete floors, a vibrant, living thing in a space that had long been a mausoleum of quiet grief and unspoken rules. That sound transported William back to another life, another woman. Sarah, Leo's mother, had hated the silence. She had called this apartment a beautiful cage, a place where feelings went to die. He remembered the day she left, her voice brittle as she told him she couldn't breathe anymore, that his controlled, predictable world was suffocating her. He had responded by doubling down, building his walls higher, perfecting his routine, and treating his heart like a business to be managed. He surrounded himself with a rotating cast of beautiful, transient women, each one a placeholder designed to prove he was fine, that he didn't need anyone. But watching Claire with his son, he was forced to confront the devastating truth. The void he had been trying to fill wasn't his own. He made a decision then, one that felt like stepping off a cliff. As Claire was getting ready to leave, he spoke again, his voice lacking its usual confident cadence. "Leo really likes you," he started, the words feeling inadequate. He cleared his throat and tried again, forcing himself to be honest. We were thinking of going to the Field Museum this weekend. Maybe you'd like to join us." The inclusion of that single word, we, was a seismic shift. It was an acknowledgement that his life was not just his own. It was the first brick he had ever intentionally laid in the foundation of a new family, not just a replacement for the old one, and he was terrified it would all come crashing down. Their first outing together felt surreal. Surrounded by the skeletons of long-extinct giants at the museum, William felt a nascent, unfamiliar sense of hope taking shape. He watched Claire and Leo from a slight distance, a silent observer of a life he wasn't sure he deserved. He saw the easy way she knelt to tie Leo's shoe, the way her fingers gently brushed a stray hair from his forehead. She didn't try to act like a mother. She was simply present, a warm and steady force of kindness. As Leo excitedly dragged her toward the T-Rex exhibit, he reached back and grabbed William's hand, pulling him along. The small, trusting grip of his son's hand in one, and the sight of Claire's smiling face ahead, created a circuit of warmth that shot through him, both thrilling and terrifying in its intensity. In the weeks that followed, Claire became a fixture in their lives. Her presence began to slowly and irrevocably change the landscape of the apartment. A half-finished puzzle sat on the designer coffee table, a splash of chaotic color against the monochrome decor. A bright blue raincoat, far too small for any adult, was hung on a hook by the door. One of Leo's drawings, the one that started it all, was now held by a magnet to the gleaming stainless steel refrigerator door. These small changes were evidence of a life being lived, not just curated. William would sometimes stand in the living room after Leo was asleep and just look at these new artifacts, feeling a profound sense of comfort that was immediately followed by a cold wave of panic. Every sign of permanence was another thing he could stand to lose. The first crack in their fragile new world appeared in the middle of the night. A piercing scream from Leo's room jolted William from his sleep. He rushed in to find his son thrashing in his bed, caught in the grips of a nightmare. But when Leo's eyes flew open, they searched past his father and found Claire, who had followed right behind. He lunged for her, burying his face in her side, his small body trembling with sobs. William stood frozen in the doorway, a spectator to his own son's comfort, A bitter, complex knot of jealousy and fear tightened in his chest. He was seeing, in real time, how deeply his son was becoming attached. The ghost of Sarah's departure loomed, whispering a cruel question. What would happen to Leo if this woman left too? It's agonizing to see someone you love navigating a minefield of potential pain. If these stories of human struggle and connection move you, subscribing to our channel allows us to continue sharing them. That fear began to poison him. William started retreating into the familiar fortress of his own emotional distance. He manufactured reasons to stay late at the office, his briefcase becoming a shield against intimacy. He'd come home after Leo was already in bed, avoiding the shared family dinners that had started to feel too real, too permanent. His conversations with Claire grew shorter, his answers clipped and evasive. He was orchestrating a slow, deliberate sabotage, convincing himself it was a preemptive strike to protect his son. In reality, he was a coward, so terrified of being wounded again that he was willing to amputate a healthy limb just to avoid the possibility of a future scratch, ignoring the phantom pain it would inevitably leave behind. Claire was not a fool. She had seen men like William before, men haunted by ghosts they refused to name. She saw the fear that flickered in his eyes whenever he looked at her and Leo laughing together. She recognized his retreat not as a rejection of her, but as a desperate act of self-preservation. She tried to reach him, to gently probe the source of his anxiety. "Is everything okay at work?" she would ask, her voice soft, offering him an opening. But he would just nod, his jaw tight, and give a one-word answer. "It'll be fine." The wall he was building between them was made of his own unspoken pain, and she knew that no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't tear it down for him. He had to be the one to do it. Leo, with the unerring intuition of a child, felt the tectonic plates of his world shifting once more. The warmth that had filled their home was receding, replaced by a familiar, chilling draft of uncertainty. His anxiety manifested in rebellion. He threw tantrums over the color of his socks, pushed his dinner away, and forgot to do his homework. Each act of defiance was a desperate question disguised as a statement. He was testing the foundation of this new happiness, pushing against Claire to see if she, too, would break and walk away. He was unknowingly playing a part in his father's tragic script, his behavior becoming the very evidence William used to justify his own fears, creating a feedback loop of anxiety and retreat. One evening, after a particularly difficult tantrum, William found Leo in his room, furiously scribbling in his sketchbook. As he watched his son, he saw not a difficult child, but a mirror of his own terrified heart. He saw the same frantic energy, the same desperate need for control in a world that felt like it was spinning away from him. A wave of nausea washed over him as he realized what he was doing. He was passing his own brokenness down to his son, teaching him that love was a thing to be feared, that every connection was temporary, and that it was safer to push people away before they had the chance to leave. This legacy of fear was the one thing he had sworn he would never give his child. Sometimes the most important journey is the one we take to face ourselves. We believe in the power of these moments, and your subscription is what helps us bring them to light. Claire, in a final, gentle effort to mend the widening rift, planned a simple picnic in Lincoln Park. The autumn sun was warm, filtering through the golden leaves of the trees, but the atmosphere between the three of them was cold with unspoken words. William went through the motions, spreading the blanket and unpacking the basket, but his movements were stiff, his smile a hollow mask. Leo stayed close to Claire, a small, silent satellite orbiting her warmth. Sensing that this fragile piece was about to shatter, Claire looked at William, her eyes filled not with anger, but with a profound sadness. She had offered him a bridge across his fear, but he remained stranded on the other side, a willing prisoner of his own past. The silence was no longer empty. It was heavy with the weight of his impending choice. The argument happened later that evening. long after the uneaten sandwiches had been packed away and the pretense of a happy afternoon had dissolved. Back in the sterile quiet of the apartment, William finally let his fear take the wheel. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion, which made the words themselves even more brutal. "I don't think this is working," he said, not looking at her. "Leo is acting out. He's confused. Maybe it's best if we just take a break." He was saying it for Leo, he told himself, to protect him, but as he spoke, he felt a familiar hollow ache. He was a surgeon amputating a perfectly healthy limb to prevent a hypothetical infection, a coward masquerading as a protector. Claire didn't fight back. She just looked at him with an immense, heartbreaking sadness, seeing the terrified man hiding behind the cruel, pragmatic words, and knew he had finally surrendered to his ghosts. From the crack in his bedroom door, Leo heard the words. He didn't understand all of them, but he understood the tone. It was the same tone his mother had used before she left, and he understood the phrase, "take a break." He knew it was his fault. He was the one who threw the tantrums, who pushed his food away, who had the nightmares. He was the problem. A cold, heavy certainty settled in his small chest. If he was the problem, then he had to leave. Quietly, he pulled on his sneakers and his jacket. On his desk lay the drawing that had started it all, the 3 stick figures under the bright yellow sun. With trembling fingers, he placed it squarely in the middle of his pillow, a final, silent message. Then, slipping past the tense silence of the living room, he opened the front door and disappeared into the hallway, a small soldier running away from a war he believed he had started. The discovery of the empty room and the drawing left on the pillow was a detonation. The carefully constructed walls of William's self-control were obliterated in an instant, replaced by a raw, primal terror that seized his lungs and made it impossible to breathe. The abstract fear of future pain was nothing compared to the immediate, gut-wrenching reality of his son being gone, alone, somewhere in the vast, unforgiving city. He turned to Claire, his face a mask of utter panic, all pretense of distance gone. She met his gaze not with an "I told you so," but with a steady, grounding calm. Her own hurt was shelved, irrelevant in the face of this shared crisis. In that moment of pure desperation, they were no longer a broken couple, but 2 people bound by a fierce, singular purpose to find the little boy they both loved more than anything in the world. They found him an hour later, huddled on a lone bench in the park where they had their sad picnic just hours before. The setting sun cast long, cold shadows, and the park lights had just flickered on, illuminating his small, shivering frame. He wasn't sobbing loudly, but his shoulders shook with quiet, hiccuping cries that seemed to tear through the evening air. The sight of his son, so utterly alone and consumed by a grief he himself had caused, shattered the last remaining piece of William's pride. This was the consequence of his fear. This small, heartbroken boy on a park bench was the true price of his emotional cowardice. He walked forward slowly, his every step heavy with the weight of his failure, the sound of his own heart pounding a frantic, guilty rhythm against his ribs as he prepared to face the devastation he had wrought. Kneeling on the cold pavement in front of his son, William finally broke. The words came out in a ragged, choked whisper, stripped of all artifice. "This isn't your fault?" "Son," he began, his voice cracking as he met Leo's tear-filled eyes. "It's my fault, all of it. I was so scared of seeing you get hurt again that I ended up hurting you myself. I was a coward, and I'm so sorry. I love you." The confession hung in the air, a raw and painful truth. Then he turned his head, his gaze finding Claire, who stood a few feet away, her own face wet with tears. He didn't stand up. He spoke to her from his knees, a position of complete surrender. "And I love you," he said, his voice gaining a sliver of desperate strength. "Please, don't leave because I was afraid. Stay, please. Help us be a family." Claire closed the distance between them. her steps silent on the pavement. She knelt beside William, placing a hand on his shoulder, a simple touch that conveyed forgiveness, understanding, and a promise. There were no more words needed. The raw, broken honesty of his confession had washed away all the fear and doubt. Together, they helped Leo to his feet, and the three of them walked home, a small, unified silhouette against the deepening twilight. Leo walked between them, his small hands clutching one of theirs on each side, a living bridge connecting two broken shores. The walk back to the apartment was quiet, but it was a different kind of silence. It was not the cold, empty silence of before, but a sacred quiet, heavy with the gravity of what had been lost and the fragile, beautiful hope of what had just been found. The war was over, and the slow, difficult work of rebuilding had finally begun. In the months that followed, the apartment began to breathe again. The sterile grey walls seemed to warm, infused with the colour of a life truly being lived. The stainless steel refrigerator, once a gleaming monument to minimalism, was now a chaotic gallery of Leo's artwork, held up by a mismatched collection of magnets, a sprawling jigsaw puzzle of a vibrant coral reef colonized the designer coffee table, its pieces a testament to shared patience and collaboration. Photos appeared on shelves and walls, the three of them laughing on a roller coaster, building a sandcastle at the beach, bundled in scarves and smiling at the Lincoln Park Zoo. William was a different man. The weariness in his eyes was replaced by a soft light, and his smile, once a rare and guarded thing, was now frequent and genuine. He was no longer a manager of his life, but an active, joyful participant in it. 2 years later, the apartment was anything but quiet. It was filled with the joyous chaos of a 9th birthday party. Leo, taller and radiating a calm confidence, directed a small army of friends in a game of charades, while William refereed, feigning seriousness. Claire moved through the happy pandemonium, her hand resting on her swollen belly, a silent promise of a new life about to join their own. She caught William's eye across the room, and they shared a look that spoke volumes, of gratitude, of disbelief, of a hard-won peace that was now their everyday reality. The ghosts of the past had not just been banished, they had been replaced by the loud, vibrant, and beautifully messy sounds of a family. This was no longer a house built on fear, but a home overflowing with love, a testament to the fact that it is never too late to start over. Hanging in the hallway, in a simple wooden frame, was the drawing that started it all. The three stick figures, holding hands under a bright yellow sun, were no longer a child's desperate wish, but a portrait of reality. It served as a permanent reminder of the moment, a life pivoted on a single, simple act of kindness. The moment someone chose to see a small boy hiding behind a sofa, it was proof that the deepest wounds can be healed not by grand gestures, but by the quiet, consistent courage to show up, to be vulnerable, and to love without reservation. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of grace can rebuild an entire world. Stories like these are worth fighting for, and by subscribing, you help us continue to share that hope with others.